You meet someone for the first time. A handshake, a smile. Half a second passes, and somewhere in your brain, a decision has already been made. Can you trust this person? You don't know yet why you think so, but the real answer is far stranger than you'd guess. Your brain didn't wait for evidence. It didn't wait for words. It looked at a face, and in less time than it takes to blink, it delivered a verdict. Trustworthy, or not. Competent, or not. Dangerous, or safe. You feel like this judgment is intuition, something earned, something wise? It isn't. It's an ancient shortcut, running on hardware built for a world that no longer exists. And it is quietly steering your life in ways you have never noticed. Start with a simple experiment. Psychologist Alexander Todorov at Princeton showed people photographs of unfamiliar faces for 1/10 of a second. That's faster than you can read this sentence aloud. Faster than a single word. And still, participants confidently rated each face on trustworthiness, competence, and likability. Give them a full second, and the ratings barely changed. Your brain isn't gathering data in that instant. It has no data to gather. It's pattern matching against something older than reasoning itself. Here's where it gets stranger. Todorov's team took this further. They showed people pairs of political candidates, faces only, no names, no policies, no party. Just asked, who looks more competent? The face voters picked won the election roughly 70% of the time. Not because the face predicted leadership skill. It predicted nothing about governance at all. It predicted only which jawline, which brow, which symmetry triggered the right ancient circuitry in a stranger's brain. Democracies are shaped in part by a reflex older than democracy itself. Doesn't that unsettle you a little? So what is this reflex actually reading? Not character, not history, not intention. It's reading shape. Specifically, it's reading how closely a face resembles the face of an infant. This is called babyfaceness, and the researcher who spent decades mapping its effects was Leslie Zebrowitz. Her work uncovered something almost embarrassing about how shallow and how powerful this system is. Adults with rounder faces, bigger eyes, relative to face size, higher eyebrows, and smaller chins are consistently rated as more honest, more naive, more warm, and more trustworthy than adults with sharper, more angular features. It doesn't matter if the baby-faced person has ever done anything honest in their life. The judgment arrives before the evidence does. Zebrowitz called this the overgeneralization hypothesis. Your brain evolved a fast, automatic response to infant features, because reacting warmly and protectively to an actual infant kept your species alive. A baby's rounded face, large eyes, and soft proportions once triggered caregiving instantly, no thinking required. That circuit was too useful to lose. But it was never built with nuance. It can't tell the difference between an actual baby and an adult who simply happens to share some of the same proportions, so it fires anyway, on the wrong target, every single day. This pattern has a name outside the lab too. The ethologist Konrad Lorenz described it in the 1940s as Kindchen schema, the baby schema. A large head relative to body, a high and protruding forehead, big low-set eyes, chubby cheeks, a small chin. Lorenz noticed this cluster of traits doesn't just appear in human infants, it appears in puppies, in kittens, in cartoon characters designed to be adored. Look at almost any beloved animated mascot, and you'll find an oversized head and enormous eyes engineered, whether the animators knew the research or not, to hijack the exact same ancient response. Now think about what that means for the adults walking around with naturally baby-faced features. They didn't choose their bone structure. They didn't ask to trigger caregiving instincts in strangers, but they inherited an unearned reputation for innocence anyway. Studies following this effect into real institutions found something remarkable. Baby-faced defendants were less likely to be convicted of intentional crimes. Judges and juries, without realizing it, extended them something closer to the benefit of the doubt. The same round-cheeked warmth that makes a stranger seem kind on a first date was quietly shaping outcomes in courtrooms. But the story has a darker mirror side. Because if soft, round features read as harmless, naive, and warm, the same overgeneralization works in reverse. Baby-faced adults are also judged in professional settings as less competent, less authoritative, less suited to leadership. Zebrawitz's research found round-faced job candidates were less likely to be recommended for roles requiring firmness or command, even when their resumes were identical to a sharper-featured rival's. The same face that earns forgiveness in a courtroom can lose a promotion in a boardroom. One reflex. Two completely different rooms. Two completely different verdicts, both wrong for the same reason. Why would your brain build something this blunt? Because for most of human history, there was no boardroom. There was no courtroom. There was a small group of people you needed to sort, fast, into categories that mattered for survival. Friend or threat. Kin or stranger. Someone to protect or someone to fear. A brain that hesitated to judge a face paid for that hesitation with real danger. A brain that judged instantly, even imperfectly, usually lived long enough to pass that habit forward. You are the descendant of the fast judges, not the careful ones. And here's the part that should really give you pause. This system doesn't just judge others, it shapes how others treat you, which then shapes who you become. Zebrowitz tracked this into what researchers call a self-fulfilling prophecy. Baby-faced children, treated as more naive and less capable by teachers and adults from an early age, sometimes internalized exactly that. Some grew more compliant, more eager to prove maturity, precisely because the world kept reading innocence onto a face that had nothing to do with the mind behind it. Your features can write a script for your life before you ever say a word. Isn't that a strange kind of inheritance? None of this stayed in the ancient past either. It rides quietly into your everyday world through every screen you unlock. Look at the mascots, brand logos, and children's characters filling your home right now. Round heads, huge eyes, tiny noses. Companies spend fortunes on design research to build exactly the proportions Lorenz described, because they know, even without citing the study, that those shapes disarm you. They make a product feel safe, trustworthy, worth loving. The same circuit that once told your ancestors to cradle an infant is now nudging you toward a cereal box. Even the faces you swipe past on dating apps and social feeds are running through this filter. A profile photo with soft, rounded features earns a warmer first impression before a single word of conversation happens. You don't choose to feel that warmth. It arrives before your conscious mind is even in the room. And once it arrives, it colors everything that follows. Confirmation bias takes the baton from there, quietly filtering the messages that person sends, the mistakes they make, the doubts you might otherwise have raised. So what do you do with a reflex this old, this fast, and this wrong so often? You can't switch it off. Todorov's research is clear on that. Even when people are warned in advance that first impressions from faces are unreliable, the snap judgments still fire. Just as fast, just as confidently. Awareness doesn't delete the reflex, but awareness changes what you do after it fires. It lets you notice the gap between an instant feeling and an actual fact. It lets you ask a better question than, do I trust this face? It lets you ask instead, what has this person actually done? Because the uncomfortable truth is this: the calm, competent, trustworthy person you're picturing right now, the mental image your brain reaches for when you hear those words, was built for you thousands of generations ago, out of round cheeks and wide eyes and nothing else. That image was never about virtue. It was about resemblance. A resemblance to something helpless, something you were built to protect on sight. You meet someone for the first time. A handshake, a smile. Half a second passes, and this time you notice the verdict your brain just handed you, unearned, unproven, and older than language itself.
Holy doodle!